What could possibly draw people into violent extremism, and how the hell do we try and prevent it? Today, my guest is Jared Shurin, and he is a strategic communications specialist who spends his time trying to stop people falling off the cliff into violence. He works with governments and NGOs on things like counter-extremism, violent misogyny, and disinformation. Asking one big question: how do we use words to genuinely make the world safer instead of more polarized and angry? I met Jared when we both spoke this year at TEDx Bristol. And as soon as I met him and heard his TED talk, I knew I wanted to get him on the podcast. And I am so glad that I did just that. Jared is a really, really great man, a great person. And the work that he's doing in the world is vital and very, very important. And you can see that the way that he explores it and remains curious about what he does is really quite inspiring, really. And I hope that we can see more people bring what he brings to this kind of conversation. The exact type of person I want on Dysfunctional, and he does not disappoint. This is a super, super interesting conversation. So sit back, get comfy, and listen in to exactly what we discuss. Dysfunction is everywhere, in our families, in our cultures, and in our systems. And this is Dysfunctional, the podcast that helps you name the things that most people can't or won't see. Let's call it out, break it down, and maybe even start a bloody revolution. Okay, here we go. Jared, how you doing, my friend?
Very well. Thanks, Josh.
I am very, very excited about this podcast with you. And I mean that genuinely for two reasons. One, because of what we're going to talk about, but two, because I've sort of met you, kind of know you now. And I think you're a very, very cool person.
That's very kind for a man that's seen me. I think my best and my worst.
Yeah, I probably have now. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second. But why don't you tell everybody just who you are and what you do in the world?
Sure. Well, obviously, thank you very much for having me on. This is very much an honor. My name is Jared Shurin. I'm a strategic comms specialist, which is wording that means nothing to anyone. But what I do is figure out how to use communications to solve real world problems. Whether that's poverty or encourage vaccination or discourage violent extremism. So it's the whole gamut of where you can use words to actually make the world a better place.
Oh, so it's about how people use words to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And for people that are listening, by the way, you are based in England, right? You're in England.
I am. I've been here for 20 years, but you can tell that the accent hasn't shifted at all. Although, whenever I'm back home, everyone thinks I'm like putting on airs and pretending to do a British accent. So clearly it shifted somehow.
Really?
Right? I think it might be the vocabulary, because I use British words with an American accent.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's probably... I didn't realize until... Obviously, you met Leona, right? And so I didn't realize until I talked to her quite a bit how many words we say that Americans don't actually even understand.
Yes.
Or phrases.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But it's a very different world. I just came back from a week in Kansas City, and it was sort of a nice refresher course in how different, for good and for bad, and all just different the two cultures are.
Yeah, they're so different, man. I was in San Francisco and LA recently, and I think I was really surprised at what the differences were as well.
Yeah.
Because my view of America, and the reason I think that as English people, we understand your vocabulary better is because most of our TV growing up was American, right? So
interesting.
We know all the American lingo because it's on our TV all of the time, but you don't watch much British TV when you're growing up, right? No. So the opposite's not true. Yeah. Yeah. But of course, my view of America is what Nickelodeon taught me, really.
I mean, that's pretty accurate. Especially when you can like stare at the camera and stop time and do stuff like that. That's all Americans can do that.
Amazing. And I want to just share with people, if we can quickly, how we met. So I met you at TEDx Bristol. So we have both now We can say this, can't we? Yeah, we
I
can,
think so.
because it's all over social media. Yeah, right. We've both now done our TEDx Bristol talk.
We have. Well, you've done it twice, and I've done it like 2/3 of the time.
Right. Okay. So for people that are listening, I did mine in the morning, right, and then was told at the end of my session that the camera didn't work. They didn't film it properly. I mean, the poor guy, Jared. He had to come to me and tell me that he messed up.
He was so nice, and he was so good.
Yeah.
That must have been absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Bless him. So yeah, and then I had to redo mine in the afternoon, which was kind of good because what I did is I let go of trying to follow my script to a T, which is what I did in the morning. What do you mean by I've only heard 2/3 of yours?
Well, you heard, the intro several times, which uh, I was the very last one for the listener. If I can apologize, I'm a little wiggly. I'm conscious, and it's partially because of my setup, and partially because there's a cat walking back and forth across my feet. So if I make your viewers nauseous, blame floof. But I was the very last speaker on the day, and some hopefully people know or don't know, they should know, you have to memorize a TED talk, like 15 minutes of like pure memorized stuff, which I've been doing for months, as have you, Josh. It's really hard. Like just memorizing something word for word is absolutely brutal. And as it turns out, not the way I present. So I
Mm,
got up there, vibed a little bit with the crowd, did a little stand-up warm-up comedy, and then forgot the first line, which was very funny. Forgot the second line. Then I think I made it all the way through to like 5 lines, prompting on every line before I finally hit my stride and sort of made it. But it was, I think what you just said about actually like leaving the script and just learning how to tell your story is a lesson I wish I had clocked, because I was so busy trying to be word perfect. You know, I had a hard time getting out of the gate.
yeah, I was in a panic. So the day before, because I never script, right? I do what you do, what you said there. I normally go up, I work out the audience, yeah, by dropping a few. I'll work out a joke as I'm walking out, a bit of an icebreaker. I'll drop that, and then I'm away. I work out what they want. Are they quite laughy? Are they quite serious? And then I'll figure out what I'm going to say, and I'll fill the time I've been allocated, whether it's 15 minutes or 15 hours, right? I'm cool doing that, but the scripting just
Yeah,
completely threw me.
it was sort of, and the whole thing. And I see why they have to do it. And it was a
Yeah,
great process, and like obviously huge amounts of support and really good challenge, all of that. But it really threw me. It's a very, you I got caught up in the challenge of memorizing all the words rather than thinking about what the words meant. And again, once I got over a very rocky beginning, it was great. And
yeah,
I'm reassured by the video guys that it's going to look fabulous. So I probably should never be admitting any of this. But
yeah. I mean, I don't know how many others you watched, but there was one girl whose talk was brilliant, but she sort of almost did it in banks of two, like
interesting. Yeah.
lines of two. But it was almost like it sort of almost worked in the end because she didn't fret about it. She just said 2 lines and then looked, said the next 2 lines and then looked. And I guess that, like you say, when the video comes out,
It's
it'll be
great.
fine, man.
The
Yeah.
videographer was in the front row, and I could see him go, "I got you." And it actually, the crowd were great. I was again lucky being last because you had warmed them up for me repeatedly at that point, and everyone. There was something really nice about being in a room where you've got 200 people that are on your side.
Yeah.
Like that's such
Yeah,
a great
definitely.
feeling.
Yeah, you really, really felt that, didn't you, as well? It did feel like you weren't being heckled when you messed up. The people really wanted you to do well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you know what I did on the Friday is I split the talk into five and then remembered what each segment was about. So, because what happened is, because I had this script, and by the way, I originally wrote my script by turning on a timer for 12 minutes, speaking for 12, timing myself to get
Right.
knowing that I need to end somewhere near 12, transcripted it, and then like just changed it a little bit and really honed it and made it more powerful, which, as you say, was an absolutely brilliant process. But what it meant is when I lost where I was, I didn't know what I was talking about. because the words had lost their meaning.
Yeah.
So like if going through and learning each segment, what's this segment about, what's the point of it, meant if I got lost, I just had to find my way by, I need to get to the segment 2, which is about this, and then I would just navigate there. Do you know what I mean?
Very much. And I think interesting. And I was talking with the organizers afterwards, like the intro was the only part of mine that didn't feel like a natural story. The
Yeah.
rest of mine, which I think is probably right. The intro was very forced, and probably why that was the bit that escaped my brain immediately.
Yeah.
The rest was good fun and easy to talk about. But
Yeah, because it's your story. Yeah, that's right, man. Yeah.
what a challenge, though. I'm delighted that we did it. I'm glad we met. Like, it's a great process, and it's
Yeah.
a really nice way to. It's a really interesting challenge. It's not anything I've
Yeah.
ever been able to do. So
You know what was really funny on yours, just to say, and I'm not giving anything away, but in the middle of your talk, you ask a bunch of questions. You go like, who here's ever felt upset or something? And everybody puts their hand up. Who here's, add somebody to turn to or whatever, put their hand up. And then you're like, who here's fluffed their lines 100 times on their TEDx Bristol talk? It was so funny, man. But you relaxed after that, innit?
did, yes. And bless, I think a few people raised their hands too. So that was a good crowd.
Brilliant. Brilliant, mate. And you like, do you know what I like about you is you was a real good sport with it as well. In many ways, man, like it would have been helpful for everybody else if you were on early so they could see you and how you took it. And because it was, man, it was quite calming to see that you came off and you weren't like, upset on a thing. You realized that you got there and that you got through it and you nailed it. So it was good.
It was such a good crowd. I mean, everyone was, there was really no way to fail. Everyone there was just, and once you sort of get into that mindset that everyone's on your side, it doesn't matter. I could have spent an hour going through it word by word, and you just sort of feel that everyone was willing me to succeed. So
Yeah.
you couldn't ask for a better atmosphere for that chaos.
Yeah. And I had 2 moments in mind. When I did the second one, I started off by saying with an icebreaker that said, at first I was upset I had to do it again. And then I realized in a minute I'll be able to update my LinkedIn profile to 2 times TEDx Bristol speaker. And then when I did fluff my lines in the middle, I made a joke about the prompter. And that sort of like eased it up as well. So I was like definitely more in my flow in the second one. But interestingly, and this is why I guess learning scripts really, really well in the end, I bet you, and I'll never know, but I bet you the talk one will be better on video because I went word for word and really nailed all of my lines, And I'd written some really, really good lines that through a computer screen are probably really powerful. Whereas I'm all about the energy in the room and how I deliver stuff, and I don't know how well that'll come across on video.
That'll be really interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how that comes out, because
Yeah,
it's a very specific and very powerful presentation setup. It's so stark and it's just you. I mean, it's like the polar opposite of what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
it's sort of anti-human in a way, but that makes it really good for the message and the story that you want to get out. But yeah, I can see exactly what you're saying. So what might work in the room might feel very different through a screen.
Yeah, which will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. What I wanted to like talk to you about, we did our dress rehearsal together, right? That run through when you was allowed to stand up there with a bit of paper in front of you, and it all just seemed like this is going to be a breeze. But the thing that the stuff that you spoke about there really blew me away, actually, and it was like really in line with a lot of what I think, and it was around extremism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give me the premise of what, so I don't butcher it?
Yeah, no worries. Well, can I do a bit of life story? Because that's always
Yes,
good fun, anyway.
please do.
Let me talk about myself, Josh.
Please.
So, I'm an ad guy. Like I started in advertising and spent, years selling sneakers, and I worked for eBay for a while, worked on the eBay account. I did cars, I did oven cleaner, I did pork products. I did the full range of
Wow.
getting people to buy things. And probably 15 or so years ago, and I was good, just for the record. I was very good at that. But about 15 years ago, I had a really weird brief come through, which was for adoption. And it was actually, it was the Department for Education at the time wanted to do a campaign to encourage fostering and adoption. And
Are you in the UK now?
I am,
15
yeah.
years ago? Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
point. Yes, this is all in the UK at this point. And I worked my ass off on it. It was a really interesting challenge, nothing I'd ever faced before. And the night before the campaign went live, I could not sleep. And I realized that for the first time in years, like what I was doing was actually meaningful work. Like
Wow.
previously, whether or not someone bought some oven cleaner is great, and like it paid the bills, and it's intellectually stimulating. Maybe not the oven cleaner, but whereas this, like, I felt genuinely guilty. Like if it doesn't work, that's money that's being wasted on this. But if it does work, I'm actually changing people's lives, or at least part of
Wow.
a process that's changing people's lives. And it worked. But I never really went back. So after that point, I only worked on government and sort of public sector and for NGOs, for charities, that sort of thing. Um,
What, purposely? You made that
Purposely,
decision, conscious decision,
yeah.
right?
I was really lucky to working at a place at the time, and following that, I had the ability to sort of flex my clients a little bit, and
Hmm.
start working on the accounts and it's still, it's not everyone talks about sort of purpose in advertising and brands that have values and this sort of thing, but it's still a very underserved sector for people that are actually using comms to make a positive difference
Mm.
specifically. Um, and After doing that for a few years, I started working in the community cohesion and specifically counter extremism space. And that,
Wow.
talk about things that you don't even know that exist until they like wind up on your desk. But the idea that um, this is a problem, that people are more fragmented, people are falling apart, people are, um, because of the society in which we live and the system in which we live, people are starting to make bad and possibly even violent choices. And that, first, recognizing that this is a problem with the system itself and there's a lot that we need to fix underneath it, but also that communications play a really important role, that maybe there's things that we can say to people that will make them maybe make more educated decisions or less dangerous decisions, or encourage more positive behaviors, or send them down more positive avenues. And the idea that this is a words problem
Mm.
was, to me, the idea. I mean, I imagine it's probably the same as if you are a math guy and NASA calls you and says send someone to the moon. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
I cannot imagine a more difficult problem than how you talk people down from violence, like at scale. And
Yeah.
that was then, um, really something I got into and did for years, and still do a bit of, and sort of very much stay involved in that space, and how you use comms to prevent social harms, whether that's violent misogyny, counter extremism, disinformation. How do we use words to encourage better behaviors in the space and more positive attitudes? And it's, no one's cracked it yet, but at least I've had the privilege of trying it for a while.
And like, I'm gonna bring some genuine
Yeah.
naivety and purposeful naivety as well. But where are you using these words? When you say you're using
Yeah.
words, are we talking billboards or are we talking
That's a
conversations?
really no, that's a really good point. And actually that's a it's a fascinating space, because that debate is still going on. Like, so imagine
Oh,
you've got, and let's say you're, I don't even know if you want to call them like pro-social, or like the good guys and the bad guys. You've got your,
yeah,
and that is a terrible reduction, but you've got people that are out there that are whispering in your words, or using algorithms, or making TikTok videos or whatever, that are sending people down negative paths.
yeah.
And we know what those sort of comms look like. We know what those videos look like, or those people sliding into your chats. We know what that looks like, that sort of communications. If you're trying to stop that from happening, there's a couple schools of thought. Like, do you do the same thing? Like, should you be sliding into people's DMs? Should you be making TikTok videos that, encourage positive things? And that, or do you, because what sort of the baddies can't do is take out a billboard. And actually, so should we be putting a lot of ads on trains? Should we be using billboards? Should we be making TV ads that say, be nice? Or, that sort of thing. And it depends. The honest answer is that there's a place for everything. Like, what you do is incredibly important. Like, you're doing this better than any government or any sort of NGO ever could, because you are a real person, you're authentic, you're talking to peers, you're making a difference. You can't have someone like me come in and buy what you're doing, right? But if you are a government, what you can do, or an NGO or NATO or whatever, what you can do is use those big official spaces to say, this is what the social norm is, or this is what the government is encouraging, or this is what we think is sort of good social examples, which is a very different sort of, like, there's a space for shouting and there's a space for conversation, if that makes sense. So that's a really wibbly answer, but the answer is sort of everything. There's a space for everything in the spectrum, because you want to talk to people in every possible way. The important thing is to understand who is talking and make sure that that's authentic. Having a podcast with NATO or the World Health Organization is not going to be as authentic as you. Whereas you, and I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here, but
that's fine. Use me, because we know we can.
But having you on a billboard would be awesome, but probably not the same thing when it comes to setting a social norm. As the Prime Minister says this is very different from Josh says this. It's about horses for courses is what that comes down to.
So are we talking about, like, actually actively going out and trying to, like, use these ways? So, like, to use the comparison, you say you started in ads and selling, right? So a big product might use an influencer and tell them to wear our clothes in their social media posts. Like, is that, like, are you talking that kind of stuff? Are they going to a version of me and saying, will you talk on your podcast about good stuff that goes against the bad people?
And there's nothing wrong or unethical about doing that, as long as it's done, properly and ethically. If someone approaches you like any other, I'm assuming, sort of sponsored content, if the government comes to you and says, could you talk about nice things? You have to say, the government asked me.
The government have asked me to talk about nice things. Like, I would have to say, this brand has asked me to wear this tracksuit. They sent me this tracksuit for free.
Exactly.
And that,
but it's really, especially for, and I think we'll get into, like, the actual nitty gritty of the stuff we want to say in this area, but especially for messages around belonging, around helping people build resilience, about helping people sort of find their space in the world. Like, you want to meet people where they are. So there is a place for that sort of, the big sort of banner, flag waving, I suppose, messaging or whatever it is. But, like, it's more, you want to find people in the spaces where they are already, whether that's their neighborhood, their doctor's clinic, their library, their gaming channels, that sort of thing. You really want to meet your audiences where they are.
Do you think, and I might get a little bit technical, like, here, or it might be like pushing to discuss certain stuff, but do you think, when I look at, like, the American election in the last one and Trump going on, Trump went on Theo Von, and he went on, was he on Joe Rogan?
He was definitely on Joe Rogan.
He was on Joe Rogan, right? And the opposition didn't do any of that, right? And so, like, I guarantee he would have reached people through being on Theo Von's podcast that he just wouldn't have reached any other way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a vast amounts of lessons to come out from the sort of Trump media strategy. But it wasn't just reaching people that no one else was reaching, but he was reaching people that no other media was reaching. You've got a lot of people where Joe Rogan is their only media consumption or their primary
Yeah.
media. So you could have politicians or journalists or whatever doing everything on all of the mainstream channels, but a huge section of the population either doesn't trust or doesn't watch or both. And
Yeah.
Trump was coming and meeting people where they were. I think the rumor is
Yeah.
that his son asked him to do that, didn't they? Barron Trump said, "Dad" or "Sir" or whatever Barron refers to Donald Trump as, but you should go on Joe Rogan, which I think is pretty
Yeah.
funny.
Well, honestly, when I saw him on Joe Rogan and I saw him on the Theo Von podcast, right? In that moment, I knew. I thought he's nailed it, right? And I'm not, by the way, remotely a supporter of him. But what he did was he nailed it. And I did actually just see that um, Keir Starmer has been on a podcast with, I don't know the dude's name, but he's got long hair and he's covered in tattoos. And he used to be on something like The Only Way is Essex, right?
Right. Like,
But so it looks like that kind of
I,
thing is spreading now,
I think
right? They're understanding it.
I think that's right. I think that is. I mean, it's the way of the world now, isn't it? Like, there's so many
Mm,
different media options that people are choosing who they want to listen to, and
mm,
especially if you're a politician, if you're any sort of big name like that, you can't just assume that if you shout loud enough through your traditional channels, you're going to reach
mm,
everyone. It's
yeah.
not the way it works anymore.
No, and especially more than ever, right? Because I guess when I was a child, there was 4 channels, and everybody watched the 10 o'clock news, right? Everybody. It was just a done thing, and everybody read one of the 3 or 4 different newspapers, you know. And whereas now, there's a massive growing part of the population that don't look at the mainstream news at all, very purposely, you know.
And even social media has sort of fallen off a cliff too, hasn't it? I mean, it's now, we're seeing more podcasts, more newsletters, more of these sort of niche networks. It's not even like, well, they're not watching the mainstream news, but as long as I get a tweet out there or I get it on Facebook, it'll be
Yeah.
like it's falling off across the board.
Yeah, that must be so hard for in a role like yours, and I'm sure there's many different versions of of what you do in different areas and stuff. It must make it really difficult. So look, to move us on a little bit, if we bring back the sort of analogy that we set, analogy is probably the wrong word, but you have your bad guys, right? The bad guys over here, for want of a better term, or there's a group of people over here who are trying to radicalize people to a view that might be deemed as extreme, right? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with extreme views.
Mhm.
That there's what specifically what the powers that be, what anyone, however, I worry about is radicalization to violence. There's it's when people fall down that path of thinking that violence is the only option, and there are malign actors that are encouraging people down that path. But in extreme view, we all have extreme views in one way or another. I mean, everyone has their
It's a really good point, man. Yeah.
it's that when radicalization to violence is when you become so disaffected with society, with that when you have given up entirely that society is fixable and you believe that the only way forward is through violence, and
Mm.
uh, that is the danger, and that is the scary thing. When and it's sad more than anything else, because what it is that you're not just giving up on the system, but you are giving up on hope in the system. You're giving up on any chance of positive change, and you actually believe that your life is at threat. It's an existential thing. You believe that the world around you is so hostile to you or to people like you that the only way forward is through violence. And it's it's tragic and upsetting more than anything else to think that we live in a world where people can go down that route, and there aren't the off ramps. There aren't ways to cycle people back into more positive alternatives. And a huge amount of the work in the space is redirecting people to more positive ways forward than believing that violence is the only solution.
So are we talking then that you are So specifically targeting might sound a bit too strong a term, but like the people that need the support in this area to try and stop them reaching a place of violence is a group of people that, how would you describe them, have lost all hope.
I think actually that's a really good description. Yes, they've lost. They generally the three words I like to bandy about, and I realize they're very vague, but are trust, hope, and faith. But they've lost hope in the future. They've lost trust in any sort of institution, and they've lost faith in other people. And
Mm.
those are sorry, something in my eye, but those are the those are the way forwards. And one of the sort of classic and sort of frightening things to think about when you are thinking about people who have radicalized into violence is that no one does so thinking they're a bad person. No, there are very, very few people that are setting out thinking, I just want to be awful and do the worst things that I possibly can. There's a sort of, there are certain super nihilist subcultures that behave that way. But generally speaking, most people that radicalize into violence are almost, they're doing so because they are worried about their own survival, or they're worried about survival of people like them. And so there's almost a misguided sense of altruism. It's like um during COVID, a lot of the misinformation around vaccines was not sent by people that were like deliberately trying to get people sick or deliberately trying to put people at risk, but because they had legitimate concerns about vaccines and
Yeah,
they wanted to protect their friends and family. They were trying to help people around them.
yeah.
And that is sort of one end of the spectrum versus obviously um, violent extremism, but it's still, you have to understand that people are coming from a almost a good place. That is a terrible phrasing for violent extremism, but
No,
they're
no,
not
but I
setting out
totally understand it.
yeah,
I totally understand it. Yeah, because I really felt when you said, what are the three terms you used? Hope, trust, and
yeah,
faith. Like when you say that, hope, trust, and faith, there's many a times in my life when I've lost those three things, and this is where really this work uh, really crosses over into a lot of the other work that I do that people won't understand. And I think this is the bit that I really got when I was listening to you talk, which is like if I did a social media post about people that we lose to suicide,
yeah.
right? Up until the point of suicide or suicidal thinking, the violent extremist, right, could look very, very similar if we built a path and a route.
Absolutely.
One goes left and one goes right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess there's like some people turn around and come back and re-find trust. But like it is almost like you could go either way, right? You're gonna become violently that, or you're gonna leave this world, right?
That's I would go further in a way and say that they are basically two expressions of exactly the same thing. I mean,
One is I'm the problem, the other one says the world's the
I
problem,
mean,
but they're both the same thing.
exactly, and both of them are as you say, giving up on trust and faith and hope, and doing violence ultimately in the end, just either to themselves or someone around them. Um, there's a one of the sort of operating frameworks I have is someone everyone has these moments where they've lost everything,
Yeah.
or they feel they've lost everything, and everyone has moments where they're rattled, they're uncertain, they're giving up, and there are three ways to go. They can engage with the problem. So I'm upset because my girlfriend left me, so I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to make myself I'm going to take that criticism head on and become a better person. Um, you can endure. You can say, I, this is just the way the world is now. I'm going to be single. That's fine. I've got two cats and a guitar. Like but like you find something else to like, just go on and accept the way. or you exit. You say, this is it. I quit. This entire system is broken. It's beyond repair. I'm going to find some way around that. And that's where, in communications, you can encourage people to engage, which is a really positive. You're frustrated with the system, or you're really angry at the world. Great. Like, here are some ways to be positive and active and engage with it.
Mm.
Or you can use comms to help people endure. Like, okay, here's a distraction. Here's something else you could be doing instead that makes you feel better. Here are ways to adapt to your new norm. Or, and this is the toughest space, is, how do you prevent people from exiting? How do you keep people from giving up entirely? And that, as you pointed out, that form of exit can take, it can take very different shapes.
Mm.
That's really what we don't want people to do, is give up entirely on being part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you do that?
it's it's really tough, and I the bulk of it is just done by people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give you a vast head from this, but like the work that you're doing, the authentic work that people are doing, but also just the vast tip of the vast iceberg of keeping people engaged and enduring and happy and alive and safe. That's just done by normal human contact.
Yeah.
What we do for our friends by existing every day, what we do for our colleagues, and just by being a part of society, we help everyone else. Um, from a comm stance, you know, a lot of it is about making sure that those positive opportunities, those ways to engage, those opportunities to belong or participate or get excited about things, making sure that those are front of mind, and that it's not just bad news all the time, or it doesn't just feel like you're surrounded by bad options, but making sure that people understand that there are people on their side, that there are cool opportunities out there, that their future is going to be more interesting than now, as well as all that sort of underlying work about trying to be a bit more transparent with the system and with the world, and make people feel that they have more ownership and more power over their surroundings.
Yeah.
It's
The agency thing's big, right? Making
exactly
people feel like they or recognize where they have their autonomy. Because if you feel like you've lost that, then the three things, trust, hope, and faith, will fall away much quicker, right?
exactly. And agency is so important, because it's cyclical. Like, if you I mean, it's the sort of teach a man to fish thing, isn't it? But like, if you can prevent someone from falling off the cliff once, but really, if you give them agency, if you show them that they can actively solve their problems, they can build themselves up. You don't have to be there every time. You're teaching
Mm,
them to take care of themselves and proving to them that they can. Um,
mm.
but that's really hard, and that's really hard with the billboard. But
Yeah.
getting
Uh,
yeah,
yeah. So let me ask you this, right? It feels like we live in a world at the moment, and in when I say in a world, I'm talking about in our society. So let's keep it, in England, right? But in our society, where there are a number of people on the certainly teetering around losing faith, hope, and trust, right?
yeah,
You get a sense, particularly post COVID and with how everything went down, trust, certainly feels like it's at a low and stuff like that, right? So we are where we are and we're here, right? So if we've got a bunch of people that are in that pool, and I get a sense that that might be the case, right? But let's just, for argument's sake, for a moment, assume that it is. We've talked about how there is potentially a group of people that are actively trying to pull those people in over here towards violence, right? What does the average, no, what, this is how I'm going to frame the question. What mistakes do you see the average good person who isn't necessarily down on faith and hope and all of those things? What mistakes do you think the good person is making in current society that's not helping those people?
That is a fantastic question. Tell you what, I read. So obviously I'm a huge. It's not even optimist. I'm a realist, and I'm convinced that people are good and that the base state is good, and I'm quite sure of it. And interestingly, I saw a study today, hot off the press, from I think it was More in Common actually, and they were looking at one particular incredibly salient issue. And I'm not even going to talk about the issue because I think what was interesting is that I think it was a microcosm for all issues right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what they found is that you had something like 16% of the country really believed thing A, and about 20% of the country really, really believed thing Z, or Z
Mm-hmm.
here, I suppose. And
Yeah.
they, it added up to about a third of the population. And neither of those groups had shifted their opinion for years. But um, they refused to talk to one another. People in Group A said if I saw any of my friends talk about Group Z, then they wouldn't be my friend anymore. And people in Group Z said the same thing. They won't talk to one another. They won't be in the same spaces. They painfully polarized. And then what you had in the middle was about 70% that actually had a really moderate take on the issue. They just wanted everyone to get past it. They wanted the world to be at peace. They wanted everything to be okay. They saw where everyone had done a bit wrong and everyone had done a bit right, and they just wanted to everyone to get along. They really held what I would consider a sort of moderate, considered positive opinion. But because of that 30%, that highly polarized 30% dominating the conversation, and whenever the media was having any sort of moderate opinion, you'd have people from A and Z jumping all over them, saying you are biased towards one way or the other, um, fighting all the time, fighting everywhere. That the 70% in the middle had checked out. They thought that everyone else in the world was polarized, and that they, the moderate middle, were the exception. And they didn't
Wow.
want to get involved in the conversation because they knew they would lose friends. They didn't want to ask questions because they knew that asking questions would suddenly, you know, kick things off. And they just didn't even want to. They were just completely overwhelmed by the frenzy of the discourse. Now, this was one particular issue, but I see that pattern over and over again. I've seen that with everything from, well, really, in pretty much every policy and social issue you see today. And I think, we have a algorithmic media system and internet system that rewards anger, that increases engagement for those hot takes. But we need space for people to be moderate and to not know. We need space for people to have questions, and for people to be patient with one another, and for people to develop their own opinions and not feel afraid to even be part of the discourse. And that,
Mm.
I think, so when it comes to your average person, going back to the question eventually, the I think about that 70% in the middle are that feel alone and feel that it's that suddenly being moderate is the scariest hot take, or not knowing. Worse yet, they feel that just not having an opinion, or not feeling informed, or being curious, they feel like can't do any of these things.
Mm.
um I'd like to hear more from them. I'd like, a little positive curiosity, or open ignorance, or the ability to change our minds, or the ability to have conversations. I think that's sort of on us to have these spaces again, to
Mm.
encourage that to others, to have conversations without jumping down people's throats. And obviously,
Mm.
don't be a dick. Respect free speech. Don't be racist. Like, it's there are some pretty clear lines, but I think we all know where they are. But you should still be able to have conversations on salient issues, and you should still be able to approach things from with a shade of gray and have these conversations with one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And you really have the answer that you've given, and going around the way that you did, like, fully answers the energy of the question that I brung as well. And I sort of, like, I'm trying to avoid, if I like, going too political with this, which kind of in a way highlights the exact point that we're trying to make, right? Because I worry that if I start bringing in left and right, then if anybody's more right leaning and I sound like I'm more left leaning, and anybody that listens to my podcast will know that I actually talk about feeling quite politically homeless, although I'm very left leaning, right? Which is the truth. But I do think that one of the issues that we have is we're in this weird space, I think, politically now, where sitting on the fence is like a radical act.
Yeah.
It used to be like, don't sit on the fence. Come on, have an opinion. Like now, if you're like, I'm just not sure, but if you look at it from a left and a right perspective, both left and right have these really loud people that are loudest on, say, social media. And then that 70% in the middle, if they're like, oh, I am a little bit worried about this issue and I don't really know where I sit with it, the polarized shout them down, right? And I sort of think that the extreme, like, or the sort of extreme right, whatever that is, I think what they've done quite well in more recent times, and I don't know how much of an opinion you can have on what I'm saying here, so I'll just say it anyway. But what I think they've done well is they've gone, you can have any opinion that you want when you're over here. Whereas the extreme left started to feel there's very, very clear lines and restrictive lines over here. And if you cross them, then you are automatically right, And I think that meant that the 70%, a lot of the 70% started in the case that I'm talking about, just easing over to the right because, well, it's just easier. And I know they say this 70% might think, well, I think they do say a lot of silly things that I don't agree with, but at least I can have this fear and this worry and I'm not beaten down for it. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. Yeah. I think taking sort of a step more abstract, I think one of the things we see in counter-extremism is the appeal of simplicity, which is people all through their lives, like they just want a simple solution to something. They just want to know that if you hit that button, or if that thing happens, or if this one thing happens, whatever, all of your problems are solved. And we really gravitate towards that because but life is really complex and really, really messy. And but it's really hard to sell reality in that way, because ultimately what we're saying to people is that, look, life is messy and complicated and not always good, and progress isn't always apparent, and things are all over the place, and you might not feel like you're going forward, you might not actually be going forward. Like, that's even speaking as an advertiser, like, that's a really bad message. That's really tough. Whereas if you slap something on a billboard that says, put on this body spray, go to, take this pill, whatever, like, this is this one solution to all your problems, people will gravitate towards that because they just want something that cuts through the clutter and the complexity of daily life. But we kind of need that complexity back. Like, we need the ability for everyone to be confused and accept a bit of confusion and have a world where our safety systems are robust enough that everyone can flounder a bit. But that's so difficult. And especially now, I keep blaming the sort of algorithmic media cycles, but like, we are in not even a 24-hour news cycle. We're in a half an hour news cycle where we just want things to happen immediately and fix things overnight. And that's just not the way the world works. And it's really tough to encourage patience in that way.
And I see the most obvious example of what you've just talked about as that of simplicity, right? In football. And the way that particularly stereotypically men, right? And I do a lot of work with men in the men's space, but I imagine it's true for all genders, right? But specifically men, you'll often hear men say, my week is defined by how good my team do on the weekend.
Wow.
And I'm like, because I was always like that, right? I feel like I'm less like it now, but I would argue it's because I manage a football team, so I don't get to watch Swindon as much, so I'm not as in it. But it's like their football team doesn't define how their week goes.
Yeah.
Their football team just gives them the simplicity of, will I be in my happiness this weekend, or will I be in all of my internalized anger and distress? And I was involved in football violence when I was younger. And I, grew up in an alcoholic home. I had a lot of complex emotional struggles that were buried down inside my body. And football hooliganism gave me a few things. It gave me connection, and it gave me, wow,
Yeah.
it gave me trust, faith, and hope. And it also gave me the simple idea that all of my hate is driven by Oxford United. And when I see them, I'm going to fight them. Right. And so I had all of the things that were missing in my life, those three things that you talked about. I found them in the simplicity of football. And in many ways, I guess that's exactly what you're talking about, right?
And you've raised, I think, probably the final most important thing, which is an enemy. I mean, it's so the most compelling and dangerous thing you can do in communications is create an enemy, because there's nothing that unites an in-group like creating an out-group. And extremists and extreme ideologies, they do that really, really well, because they can say, we have all the solutions you want. We have a simple solution you want. And the problem is that, and that is going to be some sort of out group. And it's amazing, because it can absolutely, it's incredibly seductive. It's everything you need to succeed as a communications message. And I mean, you even see that in commercial advertising, when Purcell will make dirt the enemy. It's creating a problem in order for them to provide the solution. And that sells products, which is really effective. You create a problem and then you give the solution.
Yeah, they make the dirt like a virus, don't they? On the adverts, it's like a virus, and then there's a simple solution. It's just use this.
And that's great that's a really successful and very effective advertising campaign. But when you start applying that to the human condition, you can see how that leads people down some very, very, very dangerous paths.
I also see, and again, you probably won't have a public opinion on this, but I also see opposition, it doesn't matter who's in power at the time, opposition power will often create an enemy in a way, and that's quite a dangerous way, I guess, of like, to make the current people in power, and they all do it, right? I'm suggesting they all do it, but they'll create an enemy, and it's like, and the simple solution is get these out of power, and that will defeat the enemy.
I mean, you see some terrifying political rhetoric in the US right now. I mean, you just had the president, saying things about wishing the death of Democratic senators. And then, when the White House press office has to release a statement saying the president doesn't actually want them dead, you're like, what is happening in the world today? Like, this should not be the state of political discourse. Is things that I would scold my kid for saying on the playground should not be what the people in power are using as political banter.
Yeah. You have an incredible relationship with your kid, by the way, as a bit of a side note. It was an absolute joy to see you with him at TEDx.
He is such a good little goblin. He's a lot of fun to have around, and he had a really nice time at TED.
Yeah, good. It was a lovely relationship to behold. As a father of 6, I love to see it. Well, look, where does this bring us, right? Let's just, in terms of like drawing us into the kind of just final piece of what we're talking about here. Where's the positivity in the world right now? Like, what do you see happening that's positive? What can we do that's positive? Because let me summarize quickly before I fire that question at you. What we're talking about here ultimately, and this is a big thing that I've taken from you previous to the podcast as well, is we're talking about human beings who have lost 3 vital things: hope, trust, and faith. And like, how do we restore that in these people so that they don't end up choosing violence?
Yeah. So I think there's there's two tasks there. And first, I'm going to answer this as us as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
There's a role for governments and NGOs and big institutions and charities and things like, and they need to do their jobs. And I think, whoever is in charge politically, they're all still doing their best. I think
Yeah.
the powers that be are doing their best, but they are strained. What
Mm.
we can do, I think there's two parts to. I think there's preventing people from losing that. You don't want people to fall off the cliff anyway, in the
Yeah.
first place. What can we do to be there for those around us? And that is making and supporting those opportunities when we see them. When we support your local football team, support your local library. Make sure that your neighborhood choir is doing their thing. Help wherever there are those opportunities for positivity and for belonging,
Mm.
as you said earlier, for belonging, for agency, for participation. People should be involved in their community.
Yeah, localized. That's really important,
Local
isn't
is
it?
so important.
Yeah.
Look, it not just because it's easier, but also because you'll see the difference faster.
Yeah.
Like people should take part in big marches. Absolutely vote. Like voting is the most important thing we could do. March, say your piece, sign petitions, but that stuff will take years to fold out. That's just the way the system works. But when it comes to joining your local community theater or being friendlier at your local pub, when it comes, joining your local football club, all of those things, those you can do right now. That's going to make a difference to you and the people around you right away.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and that's on the prevention side. That is the helping people not lose trust, faith, and hope. Like and also on that end, to the point earlier, make spaces for discussion and confusion. Be
Mm.
supportive of your friends. Don't immediately assume the worst in your fellow human beings. Um,
Mm.
go into this knowing what the numbers and the data prove, which is that most people are confused and friendly and willing to learn and really want to talk to other people. That is absolutely what every scrap of data and all the hard numbers know, and that's hard to keep in mind with what the world can seem like. But we are all actually on the same side, and we just need to make the space for it. Then the flip side is, and I'm going to defer to you as more of an expert in the space, but when someone around you has lost that, when they have become untethered, when they have lost that, that's not by any means, that's not a permanent condition. We all go through
Mm.
those moments, but how be there for them, making space, making time, just checking in on your friends and being that supportive person that you can be. And that, as you have talked about repeatedly in earlier podcasts in your life, that can be particularly hard for men. We are
Mm.
taught to bottle that up and be isolated and to go through this stuff on our own. And it can be really hard to check on your male friends that way. But we need to, because we are all going through it at some stage or another, at some time or another. And we just need to be a lot better at listening to one another and making space for that. But I'm also going to defer to you and many of your earlier talks on that, because that is much more your area of expertise.
It's incredible though to hear, like, when we talk about it, like even all of this, it boils down to, and so much of this does in the end, like, be there for one another. Like, try and let's reestablish community. And like, for me, when we say local community, I think that's important because, and it's not an online echo chamber, which can be problematic in its own respect, right? Like, we're talking local communities, come back to each other, be there for your fellow human being. And I think it's easy to lose that in today's world. It's easy to get lost. And I feel like I'm probably very guilty of getting lost fighting. Like, oh no, we got to fight, we got to fight for this, when actually some of the best work that I'm doing and can be done and that other people are doing is being a good human being for the people around you. And if we all do a bit more of that,
I
yeah.
I completely agree, and I think talking to the audience, So I've got the cat back down here, which is why I'm leaning at a strange angle.
By the way, just as you mentioned the cat, somewhere in there you slipped in when you were using an analogy, and you talked about if your girlfriend had left you, and you said one option I could do is say I've got 2 cats and a guitar, I'm all right. And I thought there's an insight into you.
I don't have a guitar, but you don't have to be an exceptional human being. Like I think you and your story and what you do is incredible. And frankly, I couldn't even give 2 TED Talks, much less everything else you've done in your life. But I think it's important that just being there for anyone is something that it's uncomfortable, like, because we are sort of socialized in a way to be antisocial, but it is something that we can all do. It's not hard to go to the library more, or join a football team, or sing a bit. It might feel a little weird coming out of your comfort zone, or being there for your friends, or asking, how are you doing? You don't have to be a hero to do that. That is not something that you need to wait for your superhuman friend to do for you. That's fine. That is something that all of us, the nice, average, ordinary people, can shoulder without undue burden.
It's so important, man. It's such an important point, it's on all of us, and we're all capable, I so often now hear people say, there's nothing I can do about it. You know what I mean? There's nothing, and a lot of people would have listened to this, and if we'd have asked the question at the beginning, what can you do to tackle extremism that turns to violence? Like, most people would have said, there's nothing I can do. And actually, we all can. We can all be doing something that, and if we all did it, the needle would turn greatly, and that's on us. I really do think that as human beings, we need to remember to be human, which is not where I thought this would end up, actually.
I think that's encouraging. We'll see.
Mate, this has been such a great conversation, and I think that you're a really good person.
Thank you, Josh.
And I think you're a very good person to be talking about this stuff, because you are very what's the word I'm looking for? I judge people by the way they make my body feel, and if that matches how they're acting, then they feel safe to me. And very early on meeting you, you've always felt very, very safe. Like, I feel like who you present to me is who you are. There's nothing else going on behind that, and I like it.
Thank you very, very much. That's very kind.
Could I make you feel any more awkward?
No,
Is that?
I think we all go through that, right? I mean, I'm lucky to be old and comfortable and privileged, all those things. Like, I've gone through, like everyone else, I've gone through a huge amount of my life pretending to be someone else, and then was lucky enough to find a family and a situation and cats that are like, just be you. And I'm honestly quite delighted that translates, but I am sadly, or happily, very much myself.
Yeah, I'll go with happily. You love them cats, man.
Dude, they're really good. They're really good cats. Unless he's listening. I can't say anything down.
Thank you, Jared. Mate, anything else you want to add before I close this down?
I got nothing. But thank you very much.
Well, having nothing means that we covered it all, mate. So I feel very pleased. Thank you very much. I can't wait to share this with you. I did tell you it would be dysfunctional. So thank you for sticking around till the end here. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, then please help me to grow Dysfunctional by sharing with your friends on social media. You can find me at Josh_FFW. And then wherever you're listening to this or watching this, please make sure that you've liked and subscribed, left us a 5-star review and a comment if your platform allows it. And I'll see you on the next one.